This is absolutely disgusting and I cannot believe WWE is allowing this to continue. CM Punk, one of the biggest stars in professional wrestling, a man who came back to this company after a decade away, has been the victim of what can only be described as a targeted campaign of violence and harassment, and the company is doing absolutely nothing about it. In fact, it's worse than nothing because they're actively profiting off his suffering by turning it into storyline content while a real person is being assaulted backstage repeatedly by someone we still haven't identified. Punk himself went public just hours ago demanding that WWE not only fire whoever is responsible for these attacks but actually press criminal charges and have them arrested. Let that sink in for a moment. We're not talking about worked wrestling violence, we're not talking about storyline attacks that are planned and choreographed, we're talking about a wrestler so genuinely concerned for his safety that he's calling for legal action against his attacker. And before you type in the comments that this is all a work and I'm getting worked, I need you to watch this entire video because the evidence I'm about to present proves that something very real and very dangerous is happening behind the scenes at WWE, and if the company doesn't take action immediately, someone is going to end up seriously injured or worse. So if you care about wrestlers' safety, if you believe performers have a right to feel secure in their workplace, and if you want to know the truth about who's targeting CM Punk and why WWE is complicit in allowing it to happen, you need to watch every single second of this video and then flood the comments with your outrage because this situation demands attention from everyone who loves this business. Let me take you back to when this nightmare began for CM Punk because understanding the timeline is crucial to grasping just how systematic and calculated these attacks have been. It started approximately 6 weeks ago during a Monday Night Raw taping in Chicago, which is significant because that's Punk's hometown and he was receiving one of the biggest reactions of the night. Punk had just finished a segment in the ring where he cut a promo about his journey back to WWE and his goals for the future. The crowd was chanting his name, everything seemed perfect. He headed backstage through the gorilla position, and according to multiple eyewitness accounts, as soon as he walked through the curtain, someone attacked him from behind. We're talking a full-on assault, not a worked angle for the cameras, but a legitimate attack that happened in the backstage area away from any filming. Punk was struck in the back of the head with what he later described as feeling like a blunt object, possibly a steel chair or a pipe, and he went down hard. By the time other wrestlers and security personnel responded to the commotion, the attacker had vanished into the maze of corridors and rooms that make up the backstage area of any WWE event. The immediate aftermath was chaotic because nobody knew what had just happened or whether this was part of some elaborate angle that creative hadn't informed the rest of the roster about. Punk was understandably furious, demanding to know who hit him and why security didn't catch the person. WWE medical staff examined him and determined he had suffered a minor concussion along with severe bruising and swelling at the point of impact. Now here's where it gets really disturbing. Instead of immediately launching a full investigation, instead of checking security footage and interviewing everyone who was in that area, WWE officials apparently treated this as a storyline opportunity. They filmed reaction shots of Punk being tended to by medical staff, they had backstage interviewers ask him about what happened, and they used the attack as content for the show. Punk, still dazed from the head trauma, went along with it in the moment because that's what professional wrestlers do, they perform even when they're hurt. But according to sources close to Punk, he was livid once the adrenaline wore off and he realized the company was more interested in using his legitimate assault as television content than actually protecting him and finding his attacker. That first attack could have been dismissed as an isolated incident, maybe a disgruntled wrestler or staff member who had a personal issue with Punk and acted impulsively. But then it happened again and again and again, establishing a pattern that proves this is targeted harassment rather than random violence. The second attack occurred 2 weeks later at a SmackDown taping, and this time the attacker was even more brazen. Punk was in his private locker room, a space that should have been secure and off-limits to anyone without authorization, when someone broke in while he was in the shower. Punk emerged from the bathroom to find his locker room had been vandalized, his belongings thrown everywhere, his street clothes shredded, and a threatening message spray painted on the mirror that I can't repeat verbatim due to its graphic nature but essentially promised that the attacks would continue until Punk left WWE. The terrifying part is that whoever did this had to have known exactly when Punk would be vulnerable and unable to defend himself, suggesting inside knowledge of his schedule and routine. WWE's response to this second incident was somehow even more inadequate than the first. They assigned Punk a security detail, which sounds good on paper until you realize it was just one person who was supposed to stay outside his locker room during events. That security guard can't be in multiple places at once, can't accompany Punk everywhere, and clearly hasn't been effective at preventing subsequent attacks. The company also claimed to be reviewing security footage, but conveniently, the cameras in the hallway leading to Punk's locker room allegedly malfunctioned during the time frame when the vandalism occurred. How convenient is that? In a billion-dollar company with state-of-the-art production facilities and security systems, the one camera that might have identified Punk's attacker just happened to malfunction at the exact moment it was needed most. Either WWE has the worst security infrastructure in professional sports and entertainment, or someone with access and authority is deliberately sabotaging the investigation to protect the attacker's identity. The attacks escalated from there in both frequency and severity, creating an environment where CM Punk couldn't feel safe anywhere in a WWE facility. The third attack happened in the parking lot after a live event, where Punk's rental car was found with all 4 tires slashed and the words "Go Home" keyed into the paint on every panel. The fourth attack was during a SmackDown taping where someone tampered with Punk's ring gear, cutting the straps on his knee braces in a way that could have caused serious injury if he hadn't noticed before his match. The fifth attack involved someone putting an unknown substance in Punk's water bottle, which he fortunately didn't drink because he noticed the seal had been broken. WWE had the substance tested and it turned out to be a powerful laxative that would have caused severe gastrointestinal distress if consumed, potentially embarrassing Punk on live television or forcing him to forfeit a match. Each of these incidents represents not just assault or vandalism but premeditated attempts to hurt, humiliate, or sideline one of WWE's biggest stars. What makes this situation even more infuriating is CM Punk's history with WWE and the fact that he worked so hard to rebuild this relationship only to be treated like his safety doesn't matter. Let's not forget that Punk left WWE a decade ago under contentious circumstances, burned bridges, went to UFC, and spent years criticizing the company publicly. His return was one of the biggest stories in wrestling because it required both sides to move past serious grievances and resentment. Punk came back because he believed WWE had changed under Triple H's leadership, that the toxic culture he escaped from in 2014 had been reformed, and that he could finally accomplish the goals that eluded him during his first run. He's been nothing but professional since returning, putting over younger talent, working a full schedule despite his age and injury history, and being a model employee both in the ring and behind the scenes. This is how WWE repays his loyalty and professionalism, by allowing someone to terrorize him with impunity while using his suffering for television ratings. The breaking point came this week when CM Punk was attacked for the 6th time, and this one was by far the most violent and dangerous incident yet. Punk was scheduled to have a meeting with WWE officials about his ongoing concerns regarding these attacks and the company's inadequate response. He was walking through the backstage area toward the office where the meeting was supposed to take place when someone attacked him from behind with what witnesses described as a crowbar or similar metal weapon. The attacker struck Punk multiple times across the back and shoulders, blows that could have caused permanent spinal damage or paralysis if they'd landed slightly differently. Punk tried to defend himself and fight back, but the attacker was wearing all black clothing including a mask and was clearly prepared for confrontation in a way Punk wasn't. The assault lasted approximately 30 seconds before other wrestlers heard the commotion and came running, at which point the attacker fled through an emergency exit that led to the parking area. This time, several people got a good look at the attacker even though their face was concealed, and the descriptions have been consistent across multiple witnesses. We're talking about someone approximately 5'10" to 6 feet tall, athletic build, moving with the kind of agility and awareness that suggests they have wrestling or martial arts training. The attacker was wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints and clearly knew the layout of the building well enough to plan an escape route that avoided security cameras in high-traffic areas. This level of planning and execution indicates we're not dealing with a random crazy fan who somehow got backstage or a low-level employee with a grudge. This is someone with extensive access to WWE facilities, detailed knowledge of Punk's schedule and movements, and the physical capability to execute these attacks successfully while evading capture. That necessarily limits the suspect pool to WWE personnel, either wrestlers, producers, or high-level staff members who have unrestricted backstage access. CM Punk was taken to a local hospital following this latest attack where he was treated for multiple contusions, a possible fractured rib, and soft tissue damage to his back and shoulders. More importantly, he was evaluated for psychological trauma because repeatedly being attacked in what should be your workplace is going to take a mental toll on anyone regardless of how tough they are. Punk was released from the hospital later that evening but has not appeared on WWE television since, and according to his social media statements, he has no intention of returning until the company takes meaningful action to identify and punish his attacker. He posted a lengthy statement on his Twitter account that pulled no punches in criticizing WWE's handling of this situation, and I'm going to read you some key excerpts because they're absolutely damning. Punk wrote, "I came back to WWE with the understanding that this was a different company with different leadership and a different culture than the one I left a decade ago. I was willing to give them another chance, to trust that they had my best interests at heart, and to invest myself fully in making this run successful for everyone involved. Instead, I've been assaulted 6 times in 6 weeks, my personal property has been destroyed, attempts have been made to injure me and ruin my reputation, and the company has done virtually nothing to stop it or find who's responsible. Every time I bring up my concerns, I'm told they're investigating, they're reviewing footage, they're taking it seriously, but nothing ever changes. The attacks keep happening, I keep getting hurt, and whoever is doing this keeps getting away with it. At this point, I have to conclude that either WWE is incompetent at providing basic security for their performers, or they're deliberately allowing this to continue because it creates television content they can exploit. Neither option is acceptable." He continued, "I'm publicly calling on WWE to do 2 things immediately. First, fire whoever is responsible for these attacks the moment their identity is confirmed. I don't care if it's a main event star, I don't care if it's someone's friend or family member, I don't care about the politics or the backstage dynamics. This person has committed multiple assaults and acts of vandalism and has created a hostile work environment that makes it impossible for me to do my job safely. They need to be terminated immediately. Second, and this is non-negotiable, I want WWE to press criminal charges and have this person arrested. What they've done goes beyond wrestling business, beyond backstage heat, beyond anything that should be handled internally. This is assault with a weapon, this is stalking, this is criminal harassment, and it needs to be treated as such by law enforcement. If WWE refuses to take these steps, then they're telling me and every other performer on the roster that our safety doesn't matter and that violence against us will be tolerated as long as it serves the company's interests. I won't work under those conditions, and neither should anyone else. That statement sent shockwaves through the wrestling world because CM Punk essentially issued an ultimatum to WWE: identify and punish his attacker through both corporate and legal channels or lose one of your biggest stars. The response from WWE corporate has been predictably mealy-mouthed and unsatisfying, with their official statements saying only that they take the safety and security of all performers seriously, that they're conducting a thorough investigation, and that they're working with local authorities regarding the most recent incident. Notice what that statement doesn't say. It doesn't promise to fire the person responsible, it doesn't commit to pressing charges, and it doesn't offer any timeline for when this investigation might actually produce results. It's corporate speak designed to sound reassuring without actually committing to any concrete action, and both Punk and the WWE Universe can see right through it. The big question everyone is asking right now is who could be behind these attacks and what their motivation might be, because the answer to that question will determine how this situation ultimately plays out. There are several theories circulating in the wrestling community, each with varying degrees of evidence and plausibility. The most obvious suspect pool consists of wrestlers who have had documented issues with CM Punk in the past, whether during his first WWE run or during his time in AEW. We all know Punk has burned bridges with numerous people throughout his career, he's confrontational, he doesn't suffer fools, and he's willing to go to war with people he perceives as disrespecting him or standing in his way. That abrasive personality, while it makes him compelling on television, has also created genuine enemies who might want revenge now that he's back in WWE and thriving. The problem with this theory is that most of the people who have public beef with CM Punk aren't currently in WWE, they're in AEW or working for other companies or retired from wrestling entirely. The exceptions would be people like Seth Rollins, who had that worked rivalry with Punk that incorporated real tensions from their past, but Rollins is a consummate professional who wouldn't risk his career and freedom by actually assaulting someone. There are also theories about younger wrestlers who might resent Punk for taking a spot that could have gone to them, or for coming back and immediately being positioned at the top of the card despite being away for so long. Wrestling has always had politics and resentment over pushes and opportunities, and Punk's high-profile return definitely bumped some people down the card. But again, that's a far cry from actually committing violent assaults, and most wrestlers understand that Punk being on the roster is good for business because he draws viewers and increases everyone's earning potential. Another theory that's gained traction, and this one is significantly more disturbing, is that someone within WWE management or creative is behind these attacks as a way of pressuring Punk to leave the company or to accept a reduced role. This might sound like conspiracy theory nonsense, but consider the evidence. WWE has been weird about CM Punk since he came back, sometimes pushing him hard and sometimes inexplicably keeping him off television for weeks at a time. There have been reports of creative disagreements, of Punk clashing with certain producers and writers who he feels don't understand his character or how to use him effectively. If someone in a position of power sees Punk as difficult to work with and wants him gone, but can't fire him outright because of his contract and his popularity, orchestrating a campaign of harassment that makes him quit voluntarily would accomplish the same goal. The fact that security cameras keep malfunctioning at convenient times and the investigation hasn't produced any results despite 6 separate incidents suggests someone with authority might be running interference to protect the attacker. The darkest theory, and the one I hope isn't true but can't completely discount, is that this is being done by someone with serious psychological issues who has become obsessed with CM Punk in an unhealthy way. Wrestling unfortunately attracts some people who can't distinguish between the character on television and the real human being performing that character, and who develop parasocial relationships that can turn dangerous. We've seen instances throughout wrestling history of stalkers, obsessed fans, and even other wrestlers who develop fixations that lead to inappropriate or violent behavior. If this is the case, WWE's security failures become even more inexcusable because protecting performers from obsessed individuals is literally Security 101. Every entertainment company in the world has protocols for dealing with stalkers and potential threats, and the fact that this person has successfully attacked Punk 6 times suggests those protocols either don't exist at WWE or aren't being followed. What makes this entire situation more complicated is that we're living in an era where wrestling companies deliberately blur the lines between reality and fiction, between what's planned storyline and what's legitimate conflict. WWE has used real-life tensions, real injuries, and real controversies as fodder for their television programming for decades. The Monday Night Wars were built on shooting on the competition. The Attitude Era incorporated real backstage issues into storylines, and even today, WWE regularly uses elements of reality to make their stories feel more authentic and compelling. This has created an environment where fans often can't tell what's real and what's work, and where companies can exploit real situations under the guise of storyline content. That's exactly what WWE has been doing with Punk's attacks, treating them as ambiguous angles that keep people guessing while a real person is genuinely being hurt and terrorized. The wrestling community's response to CM Punk's statement has been overwhelmingly supportive, with current and former wrestlers speaking out about the importance of workplace safety and the need for WWE to take this seriously. Multiple wrestlers have shared their own stories of being harassed, stalked, or attacked during their careers and how inadequately companies handled those situations. There's a growing consensus that wrestling has a systemic problem with taking performer safety seriously beyond just in-ring injuries, that the culture has always been about toughing it out and handling problems yourself rather than going through proper channels and involving authorities when crimes are committed. CM Punk demanding that WWE press charges and have his attacker arrested represents a potential turning point, a line in the sand that says this behavior won't be tolerated anymore and that there are real-world consequences for real-world violence. WWE finds itself in a difficult position because how they handle this situation will have implications far beyond just CM Punk. If they give in to his demands and actually fire and prosecute whoever is responsible, they set a precedent that could empower other wrestlers to speak up about safety concerns and demand action. That's good for performers but potentially complicated for WWE if it means they have to be more accountable and transparent about security matters. If they don't meet Punk's demands and he walks away from the company as a result, they lose one of their biggest stars and face a public relations disaster about not protecting their talent. There's also the possibility that they find out who's responsible and it's someone so valuable to the company that firing them would create its own set of problems. What if the attacker is a top champion or a key figure in WWE's future plans? Does WWE have the integrity to fire that person anyway, or will they try to sweep it under the rug and convince Punk to let it go? The legal implications of this situation are also worth examining because if CM Punk's account of these attacks is accurate, and I have no reason to believe it isn't given the consistency of his story and the supporting witness testimony, then multiple crimes have been committed. Assault with a weapon, destruction of property, stalking, harassment, and potentially attempted poisoning if that water bottle incident is proven. These are serious criminal charges that could result in jail time for whoever is convicted. WWE's potential liability is also significant because as an employer, they have a legal obligation to provide a safe work environment for their employees. If they knew CM Punk was being repeatedly attacked and failed to take reasonable steps to protect him, he could have grounds for a lawsuit alleging negligent security and creating a hostile work environment. That lawsuit could cost WWE millions in damages and would air a lot of dirty laundry about their security practices and internal culture that they'd prefer to keep private. What frustrates me most about this situation is that it was entirely preventable if WWE had just taken the first attack seriously and implemented proper security measures immediately. After that initial assault in Chicago, they should have assigned Punk a dedicated security team, installed additional cameras in key areas, conducted thorough background checks on everyone with backstage access, and made it clear to the entire roster and staff that violence against performers would result in immediate termination and criminal prosecution. Instead, they treated it like storyline fodder, failed to adequately protect their employee, and allowed the situation to escalate to the point where Punk has suffered multiple injuries and no longer feels safe coming to work. This is a failure of leadership, a failure of duty of care, and a failure of basic human decency towards someone who trusted WWE enough to come back after all the bad blood from his previous departure. The broader implications for wrestlers' safety across the entire industry cannot be overstated because what happens in this case will send a message to every wrestling company about how seriously they need to take these issues. If CM Punk succeeds in forcing WWE to fire and prosecute his attacker, other companies will know they can't just treat assaults and harassment as internal matters to be handled with a slap on the wrist. If WWE gets away with doing the bare minimum and Punk is forced to either accept an unsafe working environment or leave the company, it sends the message that wrestlers' safety is negotiable and that companies can prioritize storylines and politics over the well-being of their performers. This is bigger than just CM Punk, bigger than just WWE. This is about establishing standards for how the wrestling industry protects the people who risk their bodies and their lives to entertain us every week. I also want to address the people in the comments who are inevitably going to say this is all a work, that Punk and WWE are collaborating on an elaborate storyline that's getting all of us worked up. To those people, I would say that if this is a work, it's the most irresponsible and dangerous storyline WWE has ever produced. You don't work about criminal assaults, you don't work about workplace safety, and you don't work about issues that could inspire copycat behavior from unhinged individuals who think attacking wrestlers is acceptable. Even if this started as a planned angle, and I don't believe it did, it has clearly evolved into something that's causing real harm and creating a real hostile work environment for CM Punk. The fact that he's demanding criminal prosecution tells you this has gone beyond the boundaries of wrestling storylines into actual legal territory. No wrestler, no matter how committed to kayfabe, is going to publicly call for someone to be arrested unless they genuinely believe crimes have been committed against them. The clock is ticking for WWE to respond to CM Punk's demands in a meaningful way, because the longer this drags on without resolution, the worse the company looks and the more pressure builds from fans, media, and potentially even sponsors who don't want to be associated with a company that tolerates violence against employees. Punk has made his position clear: he wants his attacker identified, fired, and arrested, or he's done with WWE. The ball is in the company's court now, and their next move will tell us everything we need to know about whether they've actually changed from the toxic culture that drove Punk away the first time. If they do the right thing, if they put performer safety ahead of politics and storylines and corporate interests, they'll find the attacker, take appropriate action, and rebuild trust with their roster. If they don't, if they try to placate Punk with half measures or convince him to drop this for the good of business, then we'll know that WWE hasn't changed at all and that wrestlers still can't trust the company to protect them. What would you do if you were CM Punk in this situation? Would you continue working for a company that seemingly can't or won't protect you from repeated violent attacks? Would you trust WWE to eventually solve this problem even though they've failed to do so through 6 separate incidents? Or would you walk away from the money and the spotlight to protect your physical safety and mental health? These aren't easy questions, and I don't envy the position Punk is in, because every option available to him involves significant sacrifice. If he stays and continues performing while this remains unresolved, he's putting himself at risk every time he shows up to a WWE event. If he refuses to work until the situation is resolved, he's potentially losing income and momentum in what might be his final run as an active wrestler. If he quits WWE entirely, he's walking away from unfinished business and abandoning the goals that brought him back in the first place. None of these options are good, which is exactly why WWE's failure to resolve this quickly is so damaging. I want to be clear that my anger about this situation isn't just about CM Punk, even though he's the immediate victim and deserves better treatment. This is about every wrestler who has ever felt unsafe in their workplace, who has been harassed or assaulted or stalked and told to just deal with it privately. This is about the culture of toughness in wrestling that discourages people from speaking up about problems because they'll be seen as weak or difficult. This is about companies prioritizing their bottom line and their storylines over the human beings who make those profits possible. CM Punk is in a unique position because of his status and his willingness to speak publicly about issues, which means he can potentially create change that benefits everyone in the industry. But he shouldn't have to fight this fight alone, and the fact that he's being forced to issue public ultimatums just to get WWE to take his safety seriously is absolutely shameful. So here's what needs to happen for this situation to be resolved satisfactorily. First, WWE needs to conduct an actual thorough investigation using independent security professionals rather than relying on their internal staff who have clearly failed at this task. They need to review all security footage, interview every single person who had backstage access during the times of these attacks, and use forensic evidence from the vandalism and the weapon used in the latest assault to identify the perpetrator. Second, once the attacker is identified, WWE must terminate their employment immediately regardless of who they are or what value they bring to the company. There can be no exceptions, no special treatment, no attempting to sweep this under the rug for business reasons. Third, WWE must cooperate fully with law enforcement and support criminal prosecution of the attacker to the fullest extent of the law. Punk deserves to see justice done through the legal system, not just internal corporate punishment. Fourth, WWE needs to implement comprehensive security reforms to prevent anything like this from happening to any performer in the future. Better cameras, better security personnel, better protocols for investigating threats, and better support systems for wrestlers who feel unsafe. Until all of those things happen, CM Punk is absolutely justified in refusing to return to WWE programming. He's not being difficult, he's not being unreasonable, he's not trying to get attention or work people. He's a human being who has been repeatedly assaulted in his workplace and is demanding that his employer fulfill their basic legal and ethical obligation to protect him. That's not too much to ask, that's the absolute bare minimum expectation anyone should have from their employer. The fact that WWE has made Punk fight this hard just to get basic security and accountability shows how broken the system is and why his public stand matters so much. Every day that passes without WWE meeting his demands is another day they're telling their roster that performer safety is secondary to whatever other priorities they deem more important. I'm calling on everyone watching this video to make your voice heard on this issue, because companies respond to public pressure and bad publicity. Tweet at WWE's official accounts, tag their executives, contact their sponsors, and make it clear that fans expect better treatment of the performers we pay to watch. Use the hashtag #JusticeForPunk or whatever organically develops in the wrestling community to keep this story in the public eye until it's resolved. Share this video with everyone you know who cares about wrestling, because the more people who are aware of what's happening, the harder it becomes for WWE to ignore or minimize. Leave comments sharing your thoughts on who might be behind these attacks and what should happen to them. The wrestling community has power when we're united in demanding accountability, and this is a situation where that power needs to be exercised fully. Make sure you hit that like button if you agree that CM Punk deserves better treatment from WWE and that his attacker needs to be found and prosecuted. Subscribe to this channel because I'll be covering every development in this story until it's resolved one way or another, and you're not going to want to miss any updates. Turn on notifications so you're immediately alerted when new information comes out, because in a story this volatile, things can change rapidly. And share this video everywhere, because the more attention this situation gets, the more pressure it puts on WWE to actually do something about it rather than hoping it goes away. CM Punk put his body and his reputation on the line to come back to WWE, and this is how they've repaid him. That's unacceptable, it's inexcusable, and it needs to change immediately. The question is whether WWE will do the right thing or whether CM Punk will become yet another cautionary tale about trusting this company to have your back when things get difficult.